Welcome to the show. I wanted to talk today a little bit about toxic masculinity. I find that it's almost an overused default statement where before it actually carried some weight, now it's become kind of a scapegoat term that people use anytime that a man may act in a way that they feel is inappropriate. For instance, if two boys get into it on a playground and they get in a fight, well, that's toxic masculinity, where before it was just said boys will be boys. Now, the thing is both are true statements in a lot of cases, but the reality of it is that we choose to narrate the one that we feel best suits how we feel, rather than having a rounded point of view about it. In the example of two boys getting in a fight on a playground, to a degree, that's normal behavior that kids will fight. Is it an okay behavior? No. Will it happen? Yes. Is it a teachable moment? Yes. Because there is a time to fight, and there is a time to show patience and resolve. So what's a good example of a time to fight? Whenever somebody is beating you up, you have to fight back. You don't sit there and take the punishment, go to the hospital, and deal with all that. That doesn't make any sense. You have the right to defend yourself. So yes, you should fight back. Now, should you fight to injure? If it's just a stupid kind of fight, like somebody touched my food when I didn't want them to, no. Maybe fight to stop it. Use restraining or creating distance style tactics. But then if somebody's trying to kill me, well, then that's different. Should you let them kill you for the sake of that you are not a toxic masculine person? That's where it gets overused. And I mean, those are extreme examples. I mean, those just sometimes putting things on an extreme end kind of shows you how we get kind of caught up in things. And we just use it to support our argument, whether we're right or wrong. We just want to win. And so we'll use things to try to support our narrative to make us right, even though we've lost concept of what the value of the conversation is. You just want to be right. And that's something we all struggle with. But men are not in a prized role anymore. In fact, men have to be very, very careful because every little thing gets used against them. Even to the point, I've had this personally happen to me where I go and I open the door for somebody just because that's what my mom taught me to do, is to be a gentleman. And the reply from the person wasn't thank you. It was, I don't need no man to open the door for me. So for one, the language structure shows you the intelligence level of that person. But two, what is wrong with being kind to other people? What's wrong with showing kindness? We tend to use this as a way to shame men whenever you would deem what they did is a bad thing. But that's not necessarily a rounded look. The things that we associate. So, what is the definition of masculinity or toxic masculinity? Well, suppressing emotion, men don't cry. Aggressive and dominance as performance or proof of strength. Viewing vulnerability or empathy as a weakness. devaluing anything that would seem to be feminine, avoiding help or therapy. Because I don't need nobody to talk to about my problems. So really what that is that's showing all of the aggressive tendencies of a man. That's toxic masculinity. And I would agree with this definition of toxic masculinity. Because, like for instance, I'm gonna tell you I had a guilty pleasure, and you can make fun of me all you want, but I actually liked the Twilight movies. I know it's totally off balance or off base, kind of seems kind of out of left field, but I liked them. I watched all of them. They were getting ready to get taken off of Netflix, and I binge watched the whole movie set over the course of a few days, and I liked it. Does that mean that I'm less of a man because I liked a love story? No. But I told a friend of mine that was a male, and they were like, oh, I don't do chick flicks, blah, blah, blah. That I would define as somebody who is overcompensating the man card. And, men have to understand. I did a show on sacrificial love. It was around Valentine's Day. And, there is nothing wrong with showing your softer side. Actually, if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, women do like you to show your sensitive side. They just don't want you showing it to all the other girls. They want you to show it towards them. And for men, that can be, a tough thing, because we do have a skewed view of what being a man is. If you just watch movies, take a movie that's from 1950 and compare it, to the movies of today. But also we got to realize that there are needs for real men. Men are a little bit more of an aggressive person. Men do have a leadership quality. And to be honest, women, this is to you, you want that. You just don't like it. But you don't want a man to be somebody who can't decide or make a decision or anything like that. You want a man who will make decisions, who will be okay making decisions, who will get a job, for instance. So, cut some men some breaks. Now, if a man is abusive or mansplains everything, then that's a man who needs to learn a few things. Devaluing women is not positive, but a man does need to be a leader. He does need to be somebody who can make decisions. And when we have toxic masculinity, anytime a guy speaks up, a lot of time, oh, you're a toxic masculine. No, they're not. They're a person with an opinion. And we do that a lot of times to men. Men have to walk these some tightropes because everybody gets offended. If a man is too feminine, then that's not good. If he's too masculine, that's not good. And even if he shows a slight masculine or feminine trait, that's not good. A big thing that used to be, and still is, has a stigma to it, is a stay-at-home dad. Society still looks at that as a bad thing and will give the guy a hard time, even though it's a noble thing. It's a logical thing because in some cases, let's just take that for instance, daycare. If the man's job basically is just paying for daycare, is that really good use of that money? Probably not. And say the woman makes more money. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's just a decision that was for the better of the family. And that is what a real man is. A real man is someone who is willing to take the lead and put himself last. A real man is somebody who is going to take and preserve the family without sacrificing who he is. Some men, they just need to work. Men are, in a lot of cases, doers and fixers. And if they're not doing those things, then they're not really themselves. They don't feel good about life. And that's what they need for their mental health. So, and that's not a bad thing. But you have to take it on a case-by-case kind of situation. We, as a society, like I said, give men a hard go of it whenever it's outside the norm. Likewise, there's nothing wrong with a woman that chooses to stay home. It doesn't make them a less of a person to be a homemaker. We are getting into the society, though, where life is getting pretty hard and expensive. And in most cases now, it takes two incomes just to make the household work and provide well for your children. So if you have the ability for one of the two to stay home, that isn't a bad thing. That's not a disgraceful thing or an unproductive thing or anything like that society tends to come up with and do to shame people for stepping outside of the norm. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret that I've noticed. With this, society has found a way to shame you, men who stay home, women who stay at home, and they use terms like toxic masculinity to devalue a man to where he can't act normal. He's constantly doubting himself. And I'm going to tell you this, that since we know that the enemy is the world and in the world and going to and fro from the world, we know that this is an attack on the household, an attack on the family. We've gotten to where we've devalued men. Another thing, this is scientifically backed, that the testosterone level in men from, the 60s or so, when they started kind of checking this, isn't as prevalent as it is now. In other words, the testosterone level in men is lowering. And I find that interesting. Because as we discover that, we see this attack on the household where the roles are different or reversed. And I will tell you this much. We'll come back to this, but we need to pay attention to that. Because it takes both members of the household, both parents, to make it work, to add security for our children. But I'm going to flip it on you. That's what society says. What does the Bible say about masculinity? Well, in Corinthians, it says, "Be on guard, stand firm in faith, and be courageous, be strong." In Corinth, around this time, they're a Greek. Corinth is a Greek area. And they were molding old world religions that were polytheistic or multiple gods with multiple purposes into a monotheistic one God culture. And also around this time, there was a feminizing effect going on in the Greek area. Around this time, we're talking about that they're getting fat and happy. Let's just put it like that. They're getting comfortable in their own skin. Rome is large. Rome and Greece, they're not really at each other's throats. The Greek and Roman gods are the same with different names. The philosophies are the same. You're in the renaissance of being creative and being more on philosophy. And, it's telling you to be strong. In other words, stand up for what you believe. Now, if you take the masculine portion out of a man, is he going to stand firm? Is he going to be able to make a decision? No. So, having an opinion, being opinionated, is not a bad thing in itself. It's what you do with that opinion. It's how you allow that opinion to come across. If you just being a jerk and everybody's got to have your opinion, well, that's not cool. But if you have an opinion and you can discuss that opinion and you can, hear other people's opinion, then that's what a good leader is. Another thing is, here's another thing that's going to blow your mind. But the Bible says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This is Ephesians 5:25. Whoa, wait a minute. Everybody's supposed to serve the husband, right? Well, yes, that's a toxic masculine trait. But a real masculine trait for a husband is servitude. Not because he has to, because he wants to. Because he wants his family to do good. He wants his family to be full of love and trust. That's why Christ loved the church. Christ loved the church so much that Christ was crucified for us. He was crucified for the unpayable debt that we had in sin. And he gave it freely. Now, something about this that I want to touch on is the mob-like mentality we have now these days. We latch onto things because an influencer said it. We get mad at things at the drop of a hat. Think about it like this. Christ was a victim of the same thing. His crucifixion was because the status quo of the time was challenged. Because he was telling them, hey, I am God, and he says, I'm the Son of God. And he says, instead of doing this, be a servant. Now think about that. We don't think of God as a servant. We think of God as the main guy, the guy that does everything. He makes everything happen. But we don't think of it. We think of it as a leader, not a servant. But a good leader should be a servant. Because if a good leader listens to the people under him, then he can better lead them. And through his leadership, that is servitude. That's why whenever a ship is going down, the captain always gets off last. That's where the captain goes down with the ship philosophy came from. But that's an extreme example of what servitude looks like, is putting others before yourself. And at the same time, you're being a leader. The greatest among you will be servants, is what Matthew 23:11 says. This is a model of leadership. This is what a man should be in his household, is a leader. And another thing that is shown is emotional wisdom. Jesus cried. The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. John 11:35. He wept. This shows that a man also should show his emotion and should be there emotionally for his family. And last but not least, the righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are their children after them. Proverbs 27. So 20:7. But that talks about how a man should be an example. That's what the Bible says. A man should show wisdom, show integrity, lead through service, have sacrificial love, and show strength and purpose in what he does. That's what a man should be. But I'll tell you what happens whenever you don't have that. See, we demonize men and masculinity to a degree that's affecting things. This all started in the 80s. And now we are here in the 20s. And look what we've got. You know, what's the family dynamic like now? Well, there's an emotional and physical impact when there is the lack of a male figure in a family. They lack safety. A child will feel safer with a man around. Sorry, I know that's going to offend some people, but it's just the truth. And you can see it whenever you look at homes where there's single mothers that have raised and how the children feel. They have higher anxiety levels a lot of times, or they have a loss of their childhood to where they're overly compensating. Sometimes they have abandonment and attachment issues, and they have difficulties coping with things a lot of times. You know, a lot of times the sibling relationships blur. And what I mean by that is that, say you have the oldest and the dad's not around. Well, the oldest tends to take the place. All right, that's what I mean by the loss of childhood, is the oldest tends the place. If it's a boy, he tends to try to be the father figure. If it's a girl, they tend to try to be an extended mother figure. What does that do to them? You know, sometimes this can go on and affect into their relationships that they go in. Sometimes with the lack of a male role model, there is a disciplinary issue where the children act out more. There's trust issues because of the abandonment. All of this culminates into mental health risks with depression, anxiety, low self-esteem because of the abandonment. There is a lot of effects by not having a stable home life. And in alternate relationships, and what I mean by that is other than a relationship that consists of a man and a woman, often in same-sex relationships, one of the spouses will attempt to fulfill one of those roles. If they're masculine, then that one will attempt to be more of the feminine, and likewise in masculine same-sex relationships, male with male, one male will tend to try to be more feminine, or one will try to be more masculine. So we know that this is something that is tried to mimic in that household as well. So we need to realize that there is a reason for masculine and feminine roles in a household. Kids need both. That's the long-term impact. And our society is trying to break that up, and we can see it now. How much gender dysphoria do we have going on now? More than I've ever seen in my entire life. Kids not understanding what's up and what's down. Being taught about sexuality too early in a lot of cases, seeing things that they shouldn't, and parents being okay with them seeing it and hearing it. Whatever happened to just letting a kid be a kid? We don't realize it. We think that we're giving them more freedoms, we're giving more of them what they want, but we're taking their childhood away from them in a lot of ways because of the lack of boundaries. We're not raising our kids. This is hard. I see more disrespect and non-coping abilities than I've ever seen in my life in this current generation. I am hoping that we're just on the pendulum swing and it's swinging really far to one way and it's going to come back to center. But I don't know. And you got to realize that we're responsible for raising generations that can raise generations that also can produce leaders to help run this country. And do it better than we're doing. But are we? A movie that I watched that I thought was really interesting was this movie, and the name escapes me right now. But it was about a man who was cryogenically frozen, and he was only supposed to be frozen for like 5 years, but it broke. And it ended up him being frozen for like a stupid amount of time, like 50 years. And when he came out, he was literally kind of a dumb guy in the movie. But whenever he came out, he was the smartest guy, because everybody became so dependent on computers and what they were being fed through their computers that they couldn't do anything else. They had lost their social abilities. They had lost their ability to be a community. And we're on that track. Whether we like it or not, we're on that track. We need to be aware of this. We need to get back to discipline. We need to get back to allowing men to be men, women to be women, and stop stereotyping all of the different shades that is. We'll stereotype everything else. We'll stereotype sexuality to the gills. We'll say, oh, you're pan, or you're non-binary, or you're minor attracted, which is just a different way of saying that you like young kids. We want to sanitize everything to take what it really is out of it on all the wrong things. It's not bad to be a man. It's bad to be an abusive person, which happens on both sides of the gender. Men can be abusive, but women can be too. We need to take it on the person, not take it on a society or social level. We need to judge it on a person-by-person basis like we used to. We've made a lot of great changes, but this is not one of them. This is something that's taking this country down a path, a destructive path. And if you want to just turn around and say that Christianity promotes toxic masculinity, look at Christ. Was Christ a toxic masculine man? No, that's who we aspire to be like. But I'll tell you this much. Everybody loves to blame Christianity for everything. But the alternatives, which there always is, there's always something out there. And right now, it is the Islam faith. Well, get this. Islam faith is very strict, very harsh, and they practice something called Sharia law. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But basically, that is, if you're anything outside of what the Quran says, you get stoned. So guess what? If you're gay, you die. If you're lesbian, you die. If you're trans, you die. If you are an outspoken woman, you die. Let that settle in for a little bit. Because that is a very large, growing religion that's actually outpacing Christianity right now. And if you're not Islam, you die. Everything is you die. If you're a Christian, and you can check this out by past performances by this religion, but they'll behead you. So let's put ourselves in a knowledgeable place rather than just following all of this crap that's out there right now. If you're a Christian, get in the Bible. I mean, even if it's hard for you to read the Bible, get into some kind of a lectionary. Definitely try to find a church that fits you. But most importantly, get into the Bible. Some kind of a daily devotional is great. Bible in a year is great. That gives you some thoughts on the passages and tries to help you understand where it's coming from. YouTube is great. I follow several YouTube preachers. DLM Ministries is probably one of my favorites. But I also like David Jeremiah, Charles Stanley. A lot of these guys who preach within the means of the Bible. They don't add their own little spin to it. They tell you what they've learned and how the Bible talks to them. But anyway, I love you all. I hope you find value in this. I hope it touches you on some level to start in embracing who you are sexually. If you're a man, embracing that you're a man. If you're a woman, embracing that you're a woman. Stop trying to figure out what your flaws are and enjoy what's great about you, because God made you. God made you beautifully and in His image. And it's not for us to change. It's not for us to try to mess with. Lots of people will tell you, oh, there's hermaphrodites out there who are born with both. And you check out the science on it. There is no in between. There is XY or XX. But there is no, combo. It's just not there. It's not supportable scientifically. So if we say follow the science, we'll actually follow it instead of just following it to support your narrative. I love you all. I pray for you all. Keep the folks in Texas and New Mexico in your thoughts and prayers, and the folks here in North Carolina who all could use the good vibes being sent our way and the blessings of our Lord Jesus Christ. I hope you have a great week.